Okay, hopefully. I could hear that, so that's great. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:30, and so we will call this meeting officially to order on May 10th. This is our regular board meeting. Just for a quick roll call, we'll go through. We have Director Morris, Director Bolujak, and Director Larson. And then also, so wonderful. Also, so far at this moment, we have Dr. Herndon as well, and Ms. Martin, and of course, as always, Ms. Core running tech in the back. So welcome to our guests joining us this evening. So glad that you're here. And we will jump into our welcome message and reminder around our agreements for courageous conversations. And I'm excited to do kind of our final review of the operating agreements later on that really, I think, talk a little bit more in detail about how we actually actualize these agreements. So our 4 agreements are: stay engaged, experience discomfort, be vulnerable, speak your truth, and expect and accept non-closure. And then to the land acknowledgement. I know it says that I was supposed to read it, and then I also, just because it's my first time presiding as the president, I wanted to offer up if anybody else would be willing and like to jump in to read our land acknowledgement this evening.
I can.
Oh, thank you.
We in the Tukwila School District acknowledge that the land where we eat, teach, collaborate, learn, and play is the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and the Muckleshoot people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and Muckleshoot tribes. As a public school district, we have the responsibility for the stewardship of this land, and we recognize the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people who have been living and working here since time immemorial.
Thank you so much, Director Morris. All right, so I just want to name, I think this is allowed. I'm a little nervous, but that's okay. It's going to be just fine. I know that I've got a lot of support if I skip something or mess something up. So moving on to approval of the agenda for this evening. I will accept a motion. I think this is right.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any objections, excuse me? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so moving on to our opportunity for public comment, just kind of to remind folks of our new public comment protocol, or rather a process. There are several ways in which to offer public comment. Of course, as always, written public comment that would have been submitted this afternoon by noon. And then you also have the opportunity to submit or speak public comment here in the meeting. And you can do so by raising your hand, utilizing that Zoom feature, or simply typing your name in the chat. Deborah, do we have any public comment this evening?
I did not receive any. I am looking for names in chat or hands raised. I don't see any in chat or raised hands.
Okay, great. Well, as a reminder, as we move through tonight's agenda, folks will have an opportunity for public comment at the end, if anything does come up as we're moving through our discussion. So with that, we'll jump to reports. So the race and equity update.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, board directors and staff and all of our guests. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a few updates around race and equity, and then be in the COVID-19 updates. So one, I just want to start off on a similar vein. kind of following up from the land recognition. So late last week, I was in a meeting with the Muckleshoot tribe, and they have an annual kind of education collaboration meeting. In the past, it had been about a full day, and because it was virtual, they kind of squeezed it down into 3 hours. And I found it really interesting conversations, a lot around history of Native people in the area, and especially the Pacific Northwest. A lot of differences in maps, which were quite useful. They also talked a lot about some of the educational and college offerings that they have, both for tribal members and non-tribal members, to learn additional information about the area, the history, and the people. So it was just a really great opportunity to hear from them, and some of the challenges additionally around kind of where both the Duwamish and the Muckleshoot folks are. So I'm glad in our land recognition that we acknowledge both folks. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to continue to work with them and the Duwamish. So kind of the segue from that is, I know that the Thorndike group is continuing to work on their mascot change. And in that process, we're also looking at possibly some other name changes. So as we start to go through some of the history of what we're looking at within our community, if we're aware of some challenges, past historical issues, we wanted to be able to address those and do what we need to do. But the mascot process is one that's well underway, continued consultation with the Duwamish, and then other updates to come about possible other name changes that we might be taking a look at. So we've got a little more work to do in both of those areas. Additionally, we're also looking at investments in both race and equity for next year. So what we're trying to do is really look for support in at the classroom level with our staff, making a difference directly into the classroom. So we're outlining really what some job descriptions might look like. I think that support within the classroom with our staff directly interacting with our students and staff is just going to be a really good investment. We'll obviously continue to invest in professional development opportunities and reading and all the other ways in which we can support all staff. But I think this direct investment into the classroom is going to be well worth our while. Both in race and SEL are the two areas that we're looking at to support students and staff directly. So there's more to come on that as we look at some job descriptions and what that might look like, the amount of time, how we might be able to place people. So I would say look for those in the next couple of weeks before the end of May is what we're looking at for that to be more formalized. Additionally, we continue to look to invest. I know our human resources department is getting ready to do some interviews for one of our principal positions, Tukwila Elementary. So they're in process at screening candidates. And I know we had several different factors that we're looking at and trying to prioritize people who reflect our community and people who have multi-language skills, all welcome. So I think we've got a good group of folks that the interview team should have hopefully some really good choices for us to look at to help lead that building after Principal Salisbury will be retiring after 26 years. So that's a long time. And I know that staff are very interested in who that person is going to be, and it's going to be a big change for that building. So we're looking both to support that building and the new administrator that comes on board, whoever that may be. And then I also received some really good feedback from some of my superintendent colleagues around their student advisories that they have. And they're a little bit different, but I think they've provided some great opportunities that would really provide the opportunities for students to increase their voice, not only just at the district level, but hopefully some good examples at the building levels as well. So again, something that we'll be putting together over the next couple of weeks and be finalizing before we're done with this particular school year. So I'm excited about all of those possibilities. We've got a lot in the works. Lastly, I was speaking with Puget Sound ESD, Eileen Yoshino, Brad Brown, and Anthony Brown, who have been advising us a lot on our race and equity professional development and the work we do with the board and all our administrators and staff. So we were talking about next year as year 3 of our 3-year plan, working with them. So we will be getting together in the next couple of weeks also as we start to see the feedback from the strategic planning, because we know there'll be a lot of feedback and information about placing race and equity at the fore of our strategic plan coming up. So part of our year 3 implementation of support for the district will help be formulated by what we see in that feedback of the strategic plan. So that's also coming in the next couple of weeks. So I'm hoping, if not at the next board meeting, probably the first one in June, I'll definitely be able to provide much more information on many of these topics and more. So that's what I have for the race and equity update for this week.
I'm curious, oh, actually, sorry, any questions from folks? I had just a curiosity on the last item, kind of going into thinking about, one, how we're going to plan for, or how you're going to plan for next year, but also looking ahead. What kind of feedback have you gotten from, or input from staff around those training opportunities and the value of those training opportunities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have specific feedback from them yet, but definitely something to elicit in our conversation when we talk to them. I know staff have had the opportunity to provide feedback for the strategic planning, but I do want to get specific feedback from the individual buildings, especially their race and equity teams. So we'll definitely be soliciting that feedback before we finalize any of our plans for next year.
Do I have to officially move us to the COVID update?
Yes, so in the COVID update, a couple of things that we're looking at right now, some of which I even had some updates today from OSPI. They have a statewide monthly seminar that deals with some of the updates. Obviously, in the past, they were happening much more frequently. I think they were almost weekly or bi-weekly, and now they moved to monthly. So there are a couple of pieces that we're continuing to look at. One, I continue to monitor along with our health team, just looking at the data that we have about COVID and the transmission rate within our community. As I continue to look at that, and again, I know that's not all of the data that we have, but it is showing some kind of leveling off, at least for Tukwila specific. So the latest update that I saw from yesterday was the 7-day trend is at least trending down. So the number of cases is down, which is good. In King County, it's still a slight uptick. So they had about a 12% uptick from the previous week. But for Tukwila, it was a 22% downward trend, which is great. I mean, I'd love for that trend to continue to happen. Hospitalizations and deaths continue to remain at 0 for Tukwila specifically for almost the last 2 months. So those are also that's really good information. It doesn't mean that folks are not getting COVID, because they still are. We do have some students and staff. Our numbers specifically for us are still on a slight uptick. We get a few more each week. So we do have folks that are still in isolation. Our PPE and our tests are still plentiful. We have plenty of those available if we need them. And I do want to make sure that we keep those levels plentiful and high enough for whatever it is we may need in the future, specifically for the rest of this year. And then as we get into June and we plan for the fall, what we can stock up in over the summer to be ready for the fall. There's a lot of conversation about, all the possibilities of what the fall might look like. I don't know what that is. Who knows what some of these variants may do? It seems like every time we try and make a guess, it does something a little bit different. So we do just want to make sure we're keeping an eye on that. We don't have any new guidance from King County Department of Health right now. One of the pieces that I found a bit disappointing was that May 27th, King County is planning on closing the COVID testing site at Church by the Side of the Road. I think it's disappointing for me, and I think for the community, because even if people don't have or do have access to home tests, which are still plenty accurate, it's still not the same PCR test, which the county testing sites help provide. So I'm kind of disappointed by that. I'm hoping they can find a way to keep that open. I believe there's one in the one in Tukwila and one in Renton. We're both scheduled to close at the end of the month, which is unfortunate. Our health team is still working with our provider to look at the next vaccination clinic opportunity. It seems like they continue to push out the under 5-year-olds. So, and that's fine. I think whatever the science is saying about why they might need to do that, I just want to make sure it's going to be safe and effective for our youngest community members that we have out there. Talking with OSPI, they were also commenting about how they're not seeing or projecting any changes at this particular time either. I believe I mentioned previously, if not at a previous COVID-19 update, possibly during one of the weekly memos, the state is not making a recommendation or a requirement for students to have a COVID vaccine in order to attend school. There was a work group that was looking at that. They make a recommendation to the State Department of Health, and then the State Department of Health makes the determination about whether or not that needs to be a requirement. The working group did not endorse making that a requirement for students. However, staff, volunteers, and any contractors are still required to be vaccinated in order to be on that or to receive an accommodation. So that requirement for adults remains in place. So I found that to be also interesting. I don't know if that's going to change. When I was talking with Mr. Dragonoff about scheduling of the next vaccination clinic opportunity, what I shared was I've had some conversations with educator colleagues of mine and just other folks thinking about that. The group that is currently available to get their fourth booster shot or second booster shot, fourth shot overall. Some are considering waiting until the either late summer or early fall, so August or September, thinking that if the booster has its main effectiveness and starts to wane after about 3 or 4 months, getting it now could mean that that effectiveness starts to wane right around when school is starting again. So I think some people may be waiting for that end of summertime or even September to get that next booster shot, and it may be available for everybody else. Or it may be a recommendation for everybody else. But again, I think there's more we'll need to see for data as far as what does that look like for transmission rates based on certain variants. That could certainly change people's relevancy or urgency to get another booster shot. So lots looking at that. And then the last piece on COVID-19 was actually also a recent update. I haven't had the chance to send it out to the board, but it does relate to board meetings in OPMA. So there are some aspects of OPMA that will be sunsetting starting in June. So I just want to review that memo, look at that through WASDA, and there are a couple of governor proclamations and emergencies that will be sunsetting come June 1. So some provisions are rolling back to pre-COVID. Others, there have been some updates to OPMA and board meetings and requirements that we have to do. Most of them we actually are already doing, which is helpful. So I don't think any of the changes are much that would be impactful about how we run our meetings, because I think we've already made a lot of those changes. So thanks to some of the insight from board members and former director Apoa Ryder, who really pushed a lot on public comment. Those are part of the pieces that are in some of the changes that I think for some school districts, they didn't necessarily have in their board meeting procedures or processes. So luckily, again, not much of a change for us, but there are some things that we'll have to take a look at and discuss when we're talking about the June board meeting. So more on that in the next week or so. So that's what I have for COVID-19 updates.
So I guess when I was reviewing that material as well, I thought, and it's a little confusing, but when reading it, it sounds to me like starting in June, we will need to have in-person board meetings.
What I was getting from that was that you have to have the opportunity for a physical space for the public to be
Right.
and to have access to that board meeting, but it does not require all of the board members or staff to be present in that physical space either. There are exceptions to that from what they had commented on today, which was if in the past you had board meetings that were virtual, you're kind of grandfathered in, you can continue with those. If you just move to virtual during COVID, then that doesn't meet the same definition. The other is if there's an actual health emergency declared, then you can also continue to meet in a virtual setting and not have to provide a physical space or location for members of the public to be. And if there is a need to limit the number of people who can be in a physical space, then you just have to provide some sort of alternate opportunity for the public to be able to access the meeting. So again, I think something that we can definitely talk about at the next board meeting to prepare for our first June board meeting too, about what we would like to do for that. And I know we have an update a little bit later about
the hybrid, yeah.
Yeah, about the hybrid meeting. Yeah, we've got a questions only presentation in there.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Any other questions for Dr. Hernan about COVID? Great. All right, so moving on to the consent agenda. Accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Anyone opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moving on to board discussion. So we've got two items for discussion. The first one is the final review for our Tukwila operating agreements. So these are a set of agreements that we have been reviewing over the last the course of, I want to say about two various Saturday sessions that we've had. So here we are for our final review. Just going to open up for thoughts. There's one item highlighted still that I think we just wanted to confirm that language felt good. We wanted to sit on it, I think, for that. And then the other piece that's still in question, it looks like, is right on number 3. It says meeting conduct, but we were also exploring other words such as agreements or norms. So those are the 2 items I know we were sitting on. And then, of course, if anything else has come up over the last few weeks.
Yeah, the other thing is this, so last meeting, we just had the 3 of us were there, and the other thing, before we brought it for final approval, we wanted to make sure that Director Bolajak had a chance to provide any input that she wanted on that one before we moved ahead with it. Yeah, the stuff in yellow was kind of my suggestion for putting in there. And then the meeting, yeah, contact agreements, norms. Guess I'd be okay with any of those, but
Yeah, I don't have any strong feelings about any of this. The whole thing is called an agreement. Doesn't make sense to use agreement again. But I also kind of don't like norms because I just don't like norms. Norms always exclude someone. But I can go with any language, and the second language, the highlighted part, I'm fine with.
I am intrigued and want to lean in a little bit to your norms around, like, I totally hear how that could be true. And I also wonder if there's a way to ensure that it's not, that it is including everyone. And so maybe, if it's not a word that doesn't feel right, we don't need to use it. But I'm curious to hear a little bit more if you're willing to kind of expand or share a little bit more about that.
Oh, just the idea that there is something that's normal and everything else is not normal. And that's not what we're saying here. It's just, that's what that word comes across as. So it's not a word that I probably use very often, but I understand the intent here, so.
if you want, I kind of updated this document. Well, it's a pretty simple change. I guess Ms. Cora can just take this and put in the word, leave out the agreements and norms and just use conduct, and then bring this back for approval next time.
Yeah, that feels fine to me. I think there was a word, one just like random word change, but more of a grammatical thing. I can send that to Ms. Corp because I don't remember where it was. Wait.
Yeah, that's good.
Great. All right. Any other thoughts around this?
I think we did good work. I think we took a lot of documents and pulled them together, and we're close to perfection, but we will continue to strive for perfection, knowing that this isn't quite there yet, but.
The other aspect of it too is this is something that really need to review on an annual basis. And also when we get a new board member, it's always good to go over this material because then it gets everybody on the same page. So this is a living document.
Yeah, 100%. And even the word agreement, like, it has to be something that we all agree to, right? So to your point, when a new person comes on, I think it'll be really important that give them the opportunity to buy in and, push back and add of course, to this. Great. All right, so our second item for discussion is just a little dialogue around gender inclusive schools and kind of our commitment and like how basically we are going to really ensure that we have a consistent and clear message as a board. So I know I shared a kind of a draft letter or statement that we'll be sharing. I know you all have had the opportunity to read that, but just wanted to kind of have some dialogue here and, just opportunity to kind of be open and maybe share what maybe has come up either for you or as you've been talking with community members, because I think then that can help us answer some questions for ourselves as well, to really, hone in on what is the message that we want to make sure that we are standing firm on as a team and as a board.
I was at Foster today in some of the social studies classes, and they were doing this in their advisory session, and it was good to see that the discussion. I wish I had been there for more of the discussion, but the students seemed very comfortable with this whole concept. So, and of course, we are hearing concerns out in the community, and I think that's something to be expected. And we, as a board, need to find some way to make sure our communication strategy is consistent.
See, I haven't heard any concerns out in the community, but I also haven't heard the conversation at school. So I guess it would be helpful if somehow we knew what was what you're hearing or what other people are hearing. What are we needing to communicate more clearly? I'm not sure on that. I can imagine, but that's not always helpful.
I think they're probably the normal concerns that float around in the general public. But I have great admiration for our staff who has embraced this and are carrying on conversations that are very insightful with the students. So I think that's going to remedy a lot of our parental concerns.
What communication has gone out? Is it just, has anything official gone out from the school or from us yet?
Great question. Not at this moment. So the board, that was the one statement I was working on. Dr. Herndon, I'm not sure if you have had the opportunity to work on that, or I know I had sent you an email about connecting about that. But just what if you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, I think we're still working on the best communication strategy. We want it to be consistent with what the board has as well. So as you get this finalized for tonight, then we can make sure we've got a consistent message that we can send out. And then the school building can have that consistency too, because we know people will go, directly to the school building or contact the principal. But that way, no matter where someone may have a question, we have a consistent answer or a response for them.
So what people are responding to is kind of stories that are just creeping out.
I think it would just be some of the concerns that maybe other communities have seen as they've implemented having, bathrooms available for any students. So we've got a couple lessons learned. I know this has already been the case in Seattle. Mr. Howard has some good experience about that he can lend some insight to as it was communicated out from the building level. So again, I mean, once we know what the board has for communication, then we can make sure that our communication is close in alignment with that. Specific enough, from the staff level, but still supportive. And I really see that as being essential to make sure that everyone feels as supported as possible.
do we feel like we have buy-in from the staff? Or enough of an educational level from the staff to be able to support what we may be asking? Or are we putting something out there that doesn't have the backing of the staff yet?
Well, I think Mr. Blanton's been having conversations with students and staff, as well as Director Hoover with the group that she has around this as well. So I think she's included quite a few staff and students in the process.
I think it's one of those things that, it's never the right time, or we could always find reasons like to not do something, particularly when it challenges kind of the status quo, right, of how we've always done something or how our society is set up to navigate things. And so, the reality is does everybody have exactly what they need to be able to, have the right kind of conversations with students, have the right kind of conversations with parents, and be doing it all in a way that, is perfect? Absolutely not. And I don't think we'll be there for a long time. That's a lot of, I'm still learning, as a genderqueer person myself. And so, and that's to say it has been happening. They've had the opportunity to have some conversations and some PD, again, not enough. Those lessons that Director Morris mentioned, those are actually happening all week. The entire civics department, all those teachers have come together and created a really fantastic curriculum to really support the young people and having some conversations. So that's kind of what I know. Again, yes and no, because we're never fully there. And this really does need to be, I think, and this is kind of what the advisory committee is going to start working on, is, a really robust support system and a really robust professional development, and then really more intentional curriculum around gender studies and gender history and things like that. So tip of the iceberg, long way to go.
Well, and yeah, I'm totally supportive of this. I just want to be careful that we don't put our students in a place of risk with any staff members that may not agree. So I'm just cautious. I'm totally supportive of it. I would have done it, I don't know, 5 years ago if we could have. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's right on. I think one of the things that I continue to just grapple with is, I worry about that too, but at the same time, harm is happening right now.
Absolutely.
And, we know that for sure, based on, and there's a survey that one of the amazing students did to gather information just about how their identities are or are not being honored in the building right now. And so harm is happening. And harm won't continue to happen, but at least, there's, we're moving in the direction of, and really putting some intentional action behind trying to get,
Yeah, and I appreciate your leadership on this, Carly.
I guess the only additional, as we think about the communication strategy and education strategy, which you cover in your memo a little bit, is also thinking about communicating pretty clearly with the community, staff and students for sure, but also have some element of that is has a kind of consistent communication with the community so that they understand what's going on and why we're doing it. And yeah, not to say, we're going to wait for everybody to be totally in agreement, but at least be sure not to ignore that set of folks, because we're going to need their support on this as well. So.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. There are just a few just more word adjustments that I made. So if y'all wouldn't mind just taking one more look, and then I'd love to get that out tomorrow if y'all are able, and everyone's good with it. All right, any other thoughts around this topic? right. So moving on to our questions only presentations. Is this just where I ask kind of a blanket? Do you have any questions about any of these items?
Yeah,
Or you can go down one at a time if you want.
yeah, either way.
Okay, any questions on 7A? 7B, department update, the maintenance and operations.
Yeah, so I have a few questions on this one. So I was asking about, I know I had some conversations with Mr. Renz in the biotech area, and he was talking about some needing for some changes to the rooms that he's in, and I was curious if you've, I guess this is a question for Liliana or Ms. Cardenas, our facility inspector. Have you had any conversations with him at all?
Not at all. I have no conversations at all. I do meet with Mr. Blanton every month, and I have not received any indication from Mr. Blanton that Mr. Renz needs any help with his rooms.
Okay, well, you might check on that because it sounded like he was talking about, he's got a room that's got a lot of equipment in it, and he was talking about potentially some, not, I mean, when I say remodel, maybe some storage facilities or something like that. And I guess the same issue, I know when I was in the music room over at Foster a year or so ago, there was Mr. Maynor over there was, there's a lot of instruments that are just lying around, and just talking about, some little better storage facilities for that room. So that's, I guess, another one I just asked you to check on.
Okay.
And so my question, I was asking about the ventilation system upgrades. So you're going through, I guess, a process with our HVAC vendor. What the answer here I got, you were talking about boilers being replaced, but I was asking about the ventilation systems.
Mhm.
So is there something particular that we're looking at, for example, and I guess I've heard a couple of different things, I think our filters are MERV 11, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And so the CDC was recommending MERV 13. So as part of this ventilation review to see what it would cost if we were to get up to MERV 13?
Well, actually, we did have a conversations about this before. And when we started COVID, we started with a MERV 8 filters around the system. And we decided to go to a MERV 11 ventilation system, which we continue to work with. We haven't gone down on that part. Like I said, the problems with the MERV 13 is our equipment. It gets so much use that was deciding to just stay on MERV 11. If we move to 13, we're going to have more problems with our motors and our ventilation system that we actually and the life expectation of the equipment is going to go down. Gonna go down. So we decided to stay at MERV 11. We did already upgrade it and we already were paying for the filters as money too as well. So it's within our contract.
So I guess the question is so I'm trying to figure out what, you're looking at upgrading the ventilation system. I mean, are you talking, there's a variety of different measures you can use for, we have in our MOU about 25% outdoor air. You could have, airflow measures per hour. I mean, what is it?
What are we doing for that? Yes, perfect. It's a good question though, actually, because what we're doing is as all the systems are controlled, what we have done is, in order to get more air into the system, we have increased and we increase the airflow into our systems. the around I will say 5 o'clock in the morning, in the afternoon, I'm sorry, we have a completely rotate the air. I will say we have a complete new air coming into the building to supplant what we have in there. So we have a air fresh that we call it. So everything is already programmed into our systems to have more air. We have controls that if the room gets hotter or then we actually have limits in there that it will bring in more air into our system. So our temperatures and our controls are already programmed to work as efficient as it can be.
So then what is when you're talking about, I keep hearing that you guys are working with McKinstry on upgrading the ventilation system. So what are you talking about upgrading it for?
No, what I was told, for me, the ventilation system is the whole system, starting from the boilers into the controlled, into the mechanical. All that is for me is a ventilation system. So when I said that we were upgrading, we are right now trying to upgrade the parts that are on the life expectancy, which are, for example, those are the boilers are Thorndike and Cascade View, and we are going to be upgrading those boilers. So what we're looking at, and I send you that spreadsheet, we're looking into equipment that has a life expectancy, equipment that it's has impact in the classroom, and equipment that less expectancy, and then they are not working or they are in the process of being needed to be repaired. So all those big items that are on that list are ready to be changed or upgrade for those. So that's my what I'm talking about, the ventilation system. All that is part of the HVAC system.
Okay, so you're not talking about you're talking about repairing things that need to be replaced or repaired, as opposed to increasing throughput or something like that.
Right. Once you have a good engine, your systems start working, a good motor, a good boiler, you know, you will have a good ventilation, airflow into your classrooms and your facilities.
So,
that's what I was. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me how a boiler relates to ventilation. When I think of a boiler, I'm thinking of a heating system.
That's part of the HVAC system, and it's part of the boiler. If you don't have a boiler running, you don't have air going through the system. The boiler just warms up. We have also, and then we also have the pump systems too as well, but cooling the air that is coming into the system. So all that is just the whole equipment that we have in there. It's
Okay.
part of the whole ventilation system and the HVAC system.
Okay, so using the word, yeah, okay, the whole system, all right.
Generally, if you start looking at a whole HVAC system, then you can start running into replacing a whole electrical system. And you're talking about just those two infrastructure issues alone for a single building can run you $5 to $8 million. So it gets quite expensive pretty quickly. So, I mean, there are some things you can look at, like upgrading filters, as Ms. Cardenas said. But if you upgrade the filters beyond what the systems can handle, then they don't operate efficiently. You're not moving as much air as efficiently. So part of that is you're also looking at the lifespan for each building, because a building has a lifespan, usually about 30 to 50 years. But within that time, you're replacing a couple systems along the way, mostly, or at least you should be. So an HVAC system doesn't necessarily last the same lifetime of the entire building. A roof will get replaced probably once or twice in that time frame. So it's really looking at the system pieces we have until you're probably looking at total building replacement. So it's the timing about when you replace some of those things or what you can upgrade given the systems that are currently in the building.
Okay, so we're short of a total replacement of the total system. We're kind of, although we can't get up to MERV 13, we're kind of addressing the issue by moving more air around, because that's a cheaper thing to do and can basically achieve similar results. Okay,
Yeah. More or
okay,
less.
that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you.
And going back to the biology, the advanced biology dilemma, I think it's not particularly a remodel of his room or whatever. I think it's equipment installation. There's
Mhm.
some equipment that needs to be
Yeah.
installed in order to be used.
Right. I was not aware of the needs of Mr. Renz. I usually, and that's why I have my meetings with the principals, so the principals can inform me of the needs of the building. So that's why we're creating that extra step. So I meet with, so if there is a request from teachers, there is a request, a remodeling request, it needs to go through the principal so we can communicate and then assess their needs. If there's, I hope there was a communication, I'm not sure, but I will bring it up to Mr. Walton, and then yes, and then see if we go further.
Okay, thank you, Liliana.
You're welcome. Mhm.
Yeah, we're trying to get a list of needs so that this doesn't turn into a first come, first served basis, and then we're out of money for the year. So we're trying to be pretty coordinated about the requests that we have, just so that we can make sure we're expending and prioritizing the dollars. You know, there's a lot of need, probably there's more need than we have money to repair right away. So we just want to make sure we're addressing those in an efficient and equitable manner.
I think just was more of a comment as I was looking at kind of the project plan, that really large spreadsheet, and this may not, I don't know exactly where this falls, but locker room, particularly for Foster High School, if that's on the radar. I would just ask that as you begin to think about that project, that we really look at it through a gender inclusive lens, and that you give, that we approach it with a gender inclusive lens. If we are going to remodel, that is the opportunity to really create an environment that is conducive for gender inclusive spaces. So
Will do. Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions around this item? Okay, item 7C, school improvement plans. And I see that we have many of our wonderful principals on the call this evening. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
One kind of comment and then a question, which will be kind of the same question for everybody, but I was interested to note that several of the schools, I guess all the elementary schools and Showalter, were talking about math coaches. I think that's, so I want to make sure we really take that into account when we're thinking about budget, and particularly the ESSER dollars. A few years ago, I know we had a pretty successful math coach program at the elementary schools in combination with a new math curriculum adoption, which I also know we're in the process of looking at another math curriculum for the elementary schools. But I think the coaching model was really quite, we had some really good scores, math scores during those times. And so the fact that, you know, all the elementary principals, I think, had on their list math coaches. So I think that's, and, you know, it's interesting when we talk about ESSER dollars are one-time dollars, but at the same time, they can be used, you know, one-time purchases or infrequent purchases, and they can also, I think, be effectively used for transitions. So if we're, you know, maybe moving from a more a pull-out model into a more inclusionary and coaching kind of model, I think ESSER dollars could be really effectively used for that. So anyway, I'm you know, and the more I look at the math problem issue over the years that we've had, it's, you know, it's a systematic system level issue. So the more we can get students in the elementary grades confident as mathematics students, then, you know, that can make a big difference in middle school and high school. So anyway, I was just wanted to make that comment. The question I have, which is for each of the principals, and this is the question about, you know, I asked, are there any data that we have about how students are feeling from a social emotional perspective? And everybody kind of listed off the different data sources that they're using, which is great. But what I'm really interested in was, are people seeing any patterns in how students are feeling, and particularly any, you know, support needs around any particular groups? I know, you know, the pandemic, I think, has been probably particularly hard on students going through the transitionary periods. So students at the beginning of the system in K1, you know, maybe coming into first or second grade and not really having been through some of the socialization processes. And then also as we transition from elementary to middle school, again, more socialization processes, and the same thing at high school. So, and I know, I think we hear some students probably thrive during the remote learning, but the majority of students probably had some barriers, issues that came up. So I'm just really interested in what the principals are seeing in terms of patterns, so that we can, as we think about budgets, that we can get some supports in place for the groups that are particularly impacted. Could be special ed, could be, you know, some of these transitionary students, whatever it may be. So that's really, I'm really interested in what, you know, the students are, or what the principals are seeing at their level in terms of how we can best support the students as we move out, and hopefully we'll be moving out of the pandemic. We'll see, but anyway.
Well, I'd like to say good evening, Dr. Hernan, and good evening, board directors. We have our proud principals sitting and waiting to answer that question. I'd love to give them some time to be able to personally respond to that. If I could start with our elementary principals, I think with Principal Firmstead, proud Principal Firmstead, and then go to Ms. Thomas, proud Principal Ms. Thomas, and then we'll go to Mr. Brett Christopher, proud Principal Mr. Brett Christopher, and proud Principal Mr. Blanton is on board. Mr. Salisbury is out sick this afternoon, so we can't hear from him, but I know our principals will be happy to share.
Hello, good evening, board of directors and Dr. Hernan. Thank you so much, Mr. Howard. Thank you all for this opportunity. To answer your question, Director Larson, I would say, and I think staff would agree with this, you know, kids sometimes just need time to have those conversations about how they're feeling, right? As we know, it has been assessment heavy this year, right? We started our school year off and we jumped right into SBA in the fall. And then, right, we're getting ready to start it again in the spring, which, by the way, I got to shout out my staff and my kids because they're doing awesome. They're rocking it. And we start tomorrow with 4th and 5th grade. So thank you, go CV Cougars. But I would say they need the opportunity and time just to talk and to, you know, look at what expectations are, what they need from us. You know, staff need time to talk on what they need and resources. I've noticed that as the year has went on, there has been a lot more community building in the classrooms. I know teachers at CV have been very intentional about having those conversations with the kids. They've been utilizing the SEL time for whether it's recess or different activities for the kids to learn more and engage more. But there really just needs to be a time where it's not necessarily about curriculum learning. And if we look at Kinder, right, and we look at OSPI and what they have their time for play. And as the kids get older, of course, right, they don't use playtime, but that time is just dedicated to build social skills and understandings and the different things that come up, the difference between primary and intermediate, right? So intermediate, they're looking at the different, areas in their lives of agreement and friendships and growth and learning. And then our little kids are learning it, sharing and caring. And, so I would say it's really, if we had some time that we could build into our master schedules to support that, which wouldn't cause teachers to maybe feel like they have a crunch for learning and curriculum. I would also say any type of support, whether it be some type of coach or something that could come in and support what it looks like for SEL. I know at CV this year and last year, we had the adult SEL for our staff or part of our PDs, but what does that look like for kids? And, we know we haven't been able to have the assemblies and do the rah things for encouragement, but I think the kids miss that and they need that opportunity, right? To be able to come together and celebrate. But I would say definitely whatever we can do for some type of position or time for coaching for kids, just to have time to talk, because sometimes they just need to have conversations, especially our intermediate kiddos, our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. What are the things that are going on? What are the questions they have? We have students, as we know, that are new to our district or new to the country. So they have so many amazing attributes and characteristics to share. So what does it look like for us just to continue to grow as a learning community and continue to build together? And like I said, I got to shout the staff out. They've been amazing in compartmentalizing their time to get things done and to make it work. But I think they just need the time to have those conversations.
Thank you, Principal Firmstead. Next up, we have Principal Thomas.
Can you hear me okay? I'm speaking from my phone.
Yes.
You're coming through perfect.
Okay, great. So in terms of how any patterns of how students are feeling, here are some of the ways we're finding this information out. We have morning check-ins and afternoon checkouts for some of our students who really need to start their day off well and have a reflection at the end of the day with an adult or another student and adult. Our social worker does that. We're fortunate enough to have a social emotional intervention teacher. That is Honey Nur, who is also principal intern, and she will be starting some friendship and social skills groups. She just started April 25th, so she's juggling a lot of different things right now. We also have started Ruler. We've gotten off to a great start. And when we all made our staff charter and our classroom charters, we do talk about feelings, but we also are moving into the mood meter, and that is about emotion recognition. And so in classroom during SEL times, teachers are asking students how they feel. I do a lot of restorative conversations with students when they have problems, conflict on the playground. And I'll just tell you, the pattern I see is sad and angry. When they talk about conflict that they have with their friends, usually they feel sad and angry. If you're asking about how they're feeling in regard to coming back after COVID and being in person, I think we need to work on some kind of a survey that would be primary friendly and intermediate friendly. We do have the CEE survey coming out in the spring. We're going to do it soon. And that has questions about how students are feeling, if their teacher cares about them. Do they feel like their teacher cares about them? Does their teacher do something if another student is being unkind or they perceive that person as bullying? We also have that survey that we created for primary, so it's just a building-based survey. So that information would be forthcoming, and I invite any of the board members to reach out to me to meet with me after I've got that survey data collected, because I think that's more what the ask is. Like in general, what are we seeing? So that kind of summarizes what I'm thinking in response to that question. But do you have any follow-up clarifying questions?
No, it'll be, I'd be really interested to see the CE data done at sometimes the trick at the primary is ask the question in the appropriate manner. You get
Yeah, I can send a copy of the one we created for primary because it's like smiley faces and the survey's read to them so that it's very, very simply phrased, the questions are, and then they just circle a smiley face or a frowny face or a straight face, I believe. So it does provide the information we need, and it's primary student friendly. If you would like me to send that to Mr. Howard to forward to you, I could do that.
No, that's all right. We can just see the results when they come out. But I think also getting the start on Ruler is really good too, because it teaches students how to process their emotions, which I think is going to be a big one going forward. So that's great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have, thank you, Ms. Principal Thomas. Next up, we have Principal Brett Christopher.
Good evening. Thanks for having us tonight. I would echo some of the things that both Ms. Frenstad and Ms. Thomas have been saying with regard to what's going on at the middle level. One thing I will say that I have noticed is that our sixth graders are the ones who are probably struggling the most. So as Director Larson mentioned, those transition groups, and I mean, I think we recognize coming in that they would probably be more impacted, but I think it's been more than we had even anticipated. And so having had the opportunity to add a social worker to our counseling mix has been huge, very much needed. We had the social emotional intervention specialists in place already, thank goodness. And our folks are really busy. So we have been utilizing homeroom quite a bit to really work our social emotional learning components with the students. We are moving into Ruler as well. In homeroom, we regularly are using the mood meter to kind of help people kind of check where they are, on a daily basis. We also have our counseling team using a check yourself tool with, I think we've gone through 6th and 7th grade this year, which is kind of a brief screener. And that helps really identify some kids who are really struggling. And that's the nice thing about the screener is they'll screen up one homeroom in a given day, or they'll go to different homerooms, but they'll go through those results. And then if there are any kids that are flagging for like an immediate connection and check-in, they're providing that and then referring on if as needed. So and then keeping some things in place that we've got going where we're working to get with our partners in the King County Dispute Resolution Center to get a new grant to keep our peer mediation program moving forward and hopefully connect the high school with that as well. Having that peer component has been huge, and we want to keep keeping that going forward. As far as the assessment pieces going, we are getting ready to do CE as well, but we are doing frequent check-ins with the students, and when you listen to them, they are feeling stressed and they feel overwhelmed. They feel like they have too much homework sometimes. We had a listening session with the kids not too long ago, and that was pretty loud and clear from them. They've just come through an incredible window of time, and they're feeling those impacts. So it's we're blessed to have a tremendous team here at Showalter to support them, but we know we have a lot of work, and so we appreciate your support as well.
Thank you, Principal Christopher. Next up, we have Principal Blanton.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for having me here. I think just echoing what everybody else has been saying, we've been working on implementing Ruler. Assistant Principal Parker has been taking the lead on beginning the Ruler process and training staff with that and doing the training. I think more than anything, what we're seeing is on the extreme end of, we're seeing a lot of suicidal ideation, unfortunately, and it seems to be coming in waves. For example, last week we had 4 incidents of suicidal ideation. Our counseling staff has been awesome in handling these situations. We need to work closer. Actually, our next counseling meeting next week, that'll be a point of conversation of identifying who are the students, not just who are the students, but what trends are we seeing amongst the students. We're noticing, one thing I can tell that it's not primarily freshmen that we're seeing, although we have had freshmen, but seeing a large number of our upperclassmen. When I say large number, but the majority of them are upperclassmen with suicidal ideation. So that is definitely something that's been on our radar for this school year, and just noticing when that's popping up. November, we saw a number, they seem to come in flights right there. November, we saw a number of students. And again, last week we had 4 individual cases. Other than that, we've been really having, had a great staff being supportive of all of our students, which has been difficult for many of them while they're trying to cope with their own mental health and just adjust to everything that we've all dealt with this year. We've definitely tried to be less punitive in our approach to dealing with students in the hallways. Every school throughout, apparently, I've come to learn that pretty much every high school is dealing with students wandering the hallways. I thought it was just, what a foster issue that we're dealing with this school year, but no, that just seems to be what's happening across the state, across the country, I'm sure. So our security has developed a good relationship with students, just making sure they're safe, checking in on them as opposed to let's find a way to get them into detention. So we've definitely eased off on that end, focus more so on our check-ins. We do advisory, opportunity for students just to step back from the work from the day, get a lesson, talk over some topics. I am really appreciative of us doing the second breakfast. That definitely is a good time for our students to get a chance to relax after the start of the day, have some conversations, eat, and get their mind straight before they go to the next period. But again, we'll continue to work with the counseling department, looking at those trends and analyzing trends on suicidal ideation. And yeah, that's us at Foster.
Thank you, Principal Blanton. I would just sum up and echo everything that I'm hearing from our principals. We're continuing to work with Sound Discipline to kind of individualize ruler at each building. Thank you to Dr. Herndon for initiating that. I think the other piece that we're hearing from the principals, and we'll probably hear the same thing from our staff, is the mindset of our students coming back in. The community was really shaken. Socio-emotional and mental health was always an area in all schools across the country that was semi-supported, but not really supported. And I think you're hearing that even now. I think over the next 5 to 7 years, we'll know more and more about how the impacts of COVID has impacted our kids and our staff as well, trying to give them the necessary supports they need to continue to be a servant leader to our young people. So as we continue to take that on, I think we would be remiss if we forgot that, hey, for the last 2.5 years, it's been, oh my gosh, it's been, totally different than anything that we could ever think about. And then we came back into the building, and some students have been in our building, some students hadn't been in our building, but what does that look like to actually try to come out of teaching remotely and then coming into the classroom and then not having all the full abilities to bring community into your buildings. We're back, but we're not fully back at full strength. So I just want to put those two things out there about the community building. You're hearing from principals saying that trend is there, as well as the mindset. And it's going to take some time to move that in that direction. But what you hear from every principal here is how strong they are and the belief they have in working with our kids and our community. And I want to echo that and thank you for allowing them to speak tonight.
Yeah, thanks to all the principals. I guess one of the things I'm hearing is that there's some really good strategies in place, particularly ruler and different things about how to kind of peel the onion on this issue. I'm also hearing that, probably definitely some more staff who's expert in these different social emotional areas would be really helpful. And the good news is the state is pushing some more money to us, not like half an FTE. It's probably not enough, but the good news is also we have some ESSER dollars that we can apply to this problem as well. So yeah, anyway, thanks for all the great work that the principals are doing, and I appreciate your input. Thanks.
And we also continue to model that, like even today during our cabinet meeting, I opened that up with the ruler check-in with each of the department heads. So it's something that we're really it's useful not just for students, but for all of the adults as well. And I've been in the classrooms seeing the staff do the ruler check-ins. I mean, they're actually pretty quick. And I think, as you've heard from some of the principals, it allows them to, if they really see a student who's kind of in that red, thinking about the mood meter where they are, they just kind of quietly be like, okay, hey, as we're transitioning out, why don't you and I just chat real quick about kind of where you are here? Or in some cases, I was in one classroom and they just wrote stuff down, and they would write down some of the issues that they had. And sometimes, the teacher would take a look at them. At other times, if it was something they just needed to write down, they'd actually shred. She had a shredder. And so they'd go over and just shred that kind of feeling that they just kind of wanted to get out and then kind of get rid of. So I think we're seeing some pretty good practices. It's not ubiquitous yet, but I think it'll continue to hopefully help with both the students and the staff as we continue to work on that.
It was interesting listening to some of the foster staff today comment on how the students are so isolated. They don't know how to work collaboratively anymore. And how do we promote that? And I'm looking at these ESSER funds wondering, yes, they're not sustainable, but can we get more adults at the buildings to help fill in those gaps for the students and help them relearn some of the skills that have been lost? They're not sustainable, but I think right now the crisis mode is such that it would be nice if we could use those ESSER funds for people in the buildings.
I will say we do sometimes have positions, and quite honestly, we sometimes can't even get people to fill in the positions to even apply. So it's not even just a matter of money, it's a matter of making sure that we're going to be efficient. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this gives us a good opportunity because we do have some funding, even though it's for a short amount of time. And that's the purpose, is to help address learning loss for COVID. At the same time, I want to make sure we're not trying to create so much of an expectation that we're not going to be able to fill it, or we can't fill it in a way, that every building's going to be able to have those kind of support. So it's all, in consultation that we're having with the building levels and budget and what's within the parameters about what we can do, best practices that we're hearing from other districts as we try and work collaboratively. As Principal Blanton talked about, the issue they have about students being in the hallway, that's something everyone's dealing with right now. So we're trying to find those commonalities, as well as finding the pieces that are going to be specific to Tukwila, and then also just learning from other folks how they may have addressed some of these issues also. So I think there's a lot of work for us to continue to do, but I know our principals want to be, in that mode of supporting staff and students as much as possible. It's such a challenging position. I think they're doing a good job, and our staff are just really fantastic, and I know they're also very depleted and want to help as much as possible, and we're trying to get as much support as we can to them in as many ways as we can think to do. So sometimes we can do it in the manner in which they would like, and other times we're not able to do that, but we'll continue to try and find ways to continue to support them.
I just want to say thank you to all the principals for being here so much and sharing some of the work. Mr. Howard extended an offer for me to come, and I want to see this in action, reading things on just the narrative in that way on paper. I feel like I can't see it alive. So I really, I look forward to kind of being able to come and kind of see some of this stuff and really support you. But the biggest thing that I really want to say is that as leaders navigating this has a significant impact on you as well. Compassion fatigue is significant when we are all caregivers. You are caregivers in your role, not only for the students, but for the staff as well. And so please make sure that you are finding time and space to really feed into yourself as well and find opportunities for restoration. And if there are ways that we as a district can support you in doing that, we need to commit to do that, because it's not just about you supporting your folks, it's about us supporting you. I just want to name that and thank you for your just continuing to give and give and give and pour into your teams and your students. All right, any other questions around this item? All right, thank you so much. All right, so moving on now to item 7D, which is hybrid meeting. And once again, thank you so much, Ms. Fremstad, Ms. Thomas, Mr. Christopher, and Mr. Blanton for being here this evening. Really appreciate your time. Any questions around hybrid meetings?
So I guess I'd just throw out an opportunity. One of the options that was being looked at was this, what do they call it, the OWL system, OLW, yeah, OWL cam. So another, if you want, it sounds like they may be using that in the city, because I haven't attended a recent city council meeting, but I know the WASDA, the School Directors Association, is using that technology, the OWL cam. We were using it when I was over in Pasco last weekend to do a hybrid meeting. So a bunch of us were over in person in the room, and then others were able to come in remotely. So I know in talking with the person at WASDA who was running that, there are some rules that they kind of put together to make that work well. So if you're, I don't know, I can put you in touch with the person who's running that if you're interested in looking into that. They may be using the same technology at the city, in which case maybe you get all the information you need from there. But anyway, it'll be interesting after June, because I think what we've always said is that we want to have a hybrid style meeting going forward, where we could, when we get back to in person, that we'll also have a remote component for folks that can just sit at home and watch the meetings that way. So I think we still, I mean, there's a lot of options here, and but you know, and I think it seems like we ought to be able to find one that has done that. And I know, I guess the other question, I mean, Dr. Herndon, you were talking about potentially putting some money into building out the boardroom a little more so that it could be used not only for just board meetings that are maybe hybrid, but also for other, you know, education, teaching or opportunities and so forth. And I guess maybe that needs to be scoped out a little bit more. I mean, yeah, that sounds like a good, I mean, if we can figure out a way to do that and kill two birds with one stone, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can take a look at. And no matter how what I want to also do is, again, take a look at this and the updated WASDA OSPI release of the OPMA pieces regarding board meetings. I'm pretty sure all of these are going to meet those requirements, but you're referencing a particular system, and I am very curious to hear if that also meets the new guidance that WASDA would have for meetings. So I just don't know as much about the interactivity of it and then what we would need to do on our end, but certainly, you know, this is a priority, something we've been working on for a long time. I think it does have functional elements beyond just our board meetings. So I think it could be a good investment of what we're looking at. It's not going to be something like, you know, having worked in Seattle, their whole boardroom is just, they've got a ton of infrastructure, and they also have a complete television studio in another location. That's not what we're going to do. So we just want to make sure we have something that works well for us, gives us high quality video and audio so that we can hear people and see people, and they can hear and see what's going on in the room as well.
I mean, unless we could turn it into a full-on opportunity for like, you know, production classes on how to produce something. I don't know. Say it could still be multifunctional. It's just- Okay.
They do have some of that equipment at Showalter, actually. The students there, there is a little production studio. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, if you have your conversation with Mr. Christopher about that, add that studio onto your list. They do a great job. Honestly, they do a really good job.
I guess that's the other, potentially we're talking about staff to run the meetings. I know, you know, at Foster, they in the PAC, they have students running the technology behind the scenes. I don't know if that's possible for us or not, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can explore. We want to make sure we've got consistency behind it too. So, yeah. But if not, at least having students help out and learning some, getting some opportunities to learn that. So all information, we can continue to update some good feedback on this for sure. I'll work with Mr. Baker and our tech team and Ms. Core, and we'll figure out a good strategy moving forward.
And like I said, I can, if you're looking for somebody who's had experience with OWL, I'm happy to give you the WASDA person who's.
Yeah, that'd be great.
He lugs that around. Okay, I'll just send you his. I'll just send you him.
Please do.
Okay.
Any other questions around this item?
Well, I guess I do have one question. Can we plan on being back in person for that first meeting in June?
I think if we can, so there's two aspects that we're looking at. One is if you want this full hybrid functionality, that's what we need to figure out if we can have that in place by June. If not, we can still have an in-person meeting with the possibility of broadcasting. I don't know how much interactivity we'll have on the broadcast out though, given the technology. So that's the update that I need to kind of lay over the latest update on the OPMA meetings to make sure that we're meeting all those requirements. They're not, again, we're doing most of that now. So I think there are ways we can do it. Whether or not that's the permanent way to do it or not, I think that's definitely a discussion we can talk about what that first June meeting, how that first June meeting happens.
We only have one more meeting before that, so we've got to
We do, yes. I'll make sure we have an update by the next meeting for sure.
All right.
Great. All right. Thanks all. So we have no presentations this evening. So that puts us down to our action items. We have several items up for approval. So the first is 9A, approval of the letter of support for the South 144th Street Bridge Sidewalks Project Grant.
So I can start with a little, before you do the motion, I can just start with a little background so people know, where I'm coming from on this. So as you may recall, the South 144th Street Bridge is the one that goes over I-5, and a lot of our students walk across that bridge to get to and from Showalter and Foster every day. I actually did a little informal count because somebody was asking about that, and in the morning between 7:30 and 8, there was like 6 students, but in the afternoon there was like 45 students that went. So what that tells me is probably a lot of parents are dropping their kids off before they go to work in the morning, and then when they walk home. It's their issue. But so there's anyway, and then there's probably students outside that. So there's probably 60 or so students that are walking across that bridge every day, and the sidewalks are definitely substandard. They aren't wide enough, and I know watching the kids go back, there's usually groups of them, 2, 3, 4 kids going across the bridge at the same time, and that's not safe. It's also doesn't have the barriers over I-5. So it's a suicide hazard and a bunch of things. And so in talking with the city about it, their Department of Public Works, it's been on their radar for a while to get, it's about a $3 million project to get it addressed. And they applied for a federal grant a few years ago, didn't get it. And what I was coming to them with was seeing if we could go together with them, the school district and the city, to apply for a grant from our capital projects from the state, and work with our representative Hackney, who's on that committee, to help do that. And so we were kind of working on that, eyeing this next legislative session to try and get that. In the interim, Brittany Robinson, who works for the city, she's the person that keeps her eyes open for grant opportunities, and she spotted this one with the Puget Sound. It's a group called the Puget Sound Regional Council. They're a group that's kind of includes all the cities and counties around the Puget Sound and King, Pierce, Snohomish areas. And apparently there's some money there. It's interesting, so the federal government has been, they passed put a ton of money into infrastructure around the country. So that money is starting to flow down to various agencies, and probably some of it's hitting this organization. And anyway, Brittany spotted this opportunity and thought it would be a good fit. And so she's looking for us to basically just support her application to the Puget Sound Regional Council Board in conjunction with the city, and hopefully we can get this thing funded sooner rather than later. So anyway, that's the background on this issue that I just wanted. So it's pretty simple. This letter here, we would just dress it up, put it on letterhead, and then anybody who wanted could sign on to it. And then she's going to submit this as part of the application that comes from the city with our letter of support in there as well. And so anyway, that's the background on this.
And I'm happy to add my signature to that as the superintendent. I've walked across that bridge also. Sometimes I walk from the central office over to Tuckell. Those hills are steep, but they're a good workout to get over there. And I can say that sidewalk is really narrow. So if there is someone coming the other way, that's the part that always concerns me the most. The barrier to I-5 is one, that it's low, and the curb part, but it's really like if there's another person coming the other way, it's pretty narrow. It's too narrow.
Okay, so now if you want a motion, I can.
Yeah, so let's accept a motion.
Okay, so move to approve this letter of support.
Second.
Okay, it has been motioned and seconded. Any objections? Okay, all in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think I saw and heard everyone, so it passes. So moving on to action item 9B, approval of the board budget philosophy for this upcoming budget year, 2022-2023. Accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or objection? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and it passes. And now 9C, approval of the resolution number 923, which is approving the appointment of architect for Showalter Kitchen remodel. Accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Any objection? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I just didn't hear. Okay. All three were ayes?
Yes.
Okay. It was just, must have just talking over itself. Okay. Great. So this passes. Thank you. 9D, approval of out-of-state travel requests for the Native American Student Advocacy Institute.
So
I'll
moved.
accept a motion. Thank you.
Second.
Any objections or discussion? And all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, wonderful. I heard 3 ayes. Now to 9E, approval of out-of-state travel requests for the National Council for Community and Education Partnership. I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And any objections, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Wonderful. All right, that item stands approved. So that brings us to our closing opportunity for public comment. If anyone would like to speak and provide public comment, you can raise your hand or put your name in the chat. Give me just a moment. Seeing none pop up. Zoom time, always leave a little extra. Okay, so seeing none, that brings us to adjourn. I'll accept a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved. Second.
All right, anyone opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Thanks so much for being here. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Good evening.